Hello, pirates. Today we are talking about neurons and how neurons transmit information to the nervous system. So, the human body has about 86 billion neurons, and these are the basic cellular components of the nervous system. So, when you think of that generic cell that we colored and looked at the beginning of the year, this is that same cell just with a different shape because it has a different function. So cells differentiate and become very specialized to their job or their role. So a neuron's job is to take information from its environment or other neurons and transmit it to the next neuron or into the nervous system, to the central nervous system, to the brain and the spinal cord, where those decisions will be made of what to do with that information and to act and respond to it. So when we look at the neuron, the nerve signal is going to be moving from one side of the neuron. So it's going to enter the neuron in one area and it's going to move the neuron into the signal across into the other. So starting with the dendrites are going to reach out and take in that information from the environment. So they're branching out almost like a tree branch branches out. And here these neurons are reaching out to look for that info. All right, so here you can see them branching out and they're looking for signals. And what those signals are going to enter in is they're going to enter either from sensory neurons, things like a photoreceptor neuron might take in light, or a sound receptor. And so this first structure here, structure number 1, these are the neuron's dendrites. So this is part of the nerve cell. And what those dendrites are going to do is they receive signals, and they're going to receive signals from the environment or from other neurons. And they're going to come in the form of neurotransmitters, which are like chemicals that are being released to trigger neuron to neuron. It could be in the form of sensory reception, so things like temperature, things like pressure. You know, if you press your hand, you feel the pressure. We have pain receptors, chemoreceptors in our nose and mouth to taste chemical, things like sound, those are mechanoreceptors. So all these different sensory neurons are taking in information, and then motor neurons are acting on this information. So these are the dendrites. The second part of our nerve cell here, the neuron, is the soma. And this is the cell body. So this is the main part of the cell. So right in here, this is the cell body. And the cell body is going to contain all of the cell's organelles. So when you think about the cell that we looked at before that had the Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum, all of that is located in the cell body. So structure number 2 is the cell body, which sometimes is referred to as the soma. All right, and this contains the organelles. All right, the next structure in our cell is that thing in the center of the cell that's making all those decisions. Okay, and this right here, that thing in the center, is the cell's nucleus. Okay, so structure 3 there is the cell's nucleus. And if you guys remember, the nucleus is the control center of the cell. So it's going to make that decision to either take the signal and move it on down the line or to stop it right there. And this is also going to contain the DNA. All right, if that signal is sent on down the line is going to send that signal down the axon. So the axon is going to be right here. So this is the length of the neuron. And axons can be very long. They can go all the way from your big toe up to your knee, from your knee up to the entry point to your spinal cord. So here is the axon. So structure number 4 is the axon. And the axon is going to transmit our nervous signal. So it transmits the signal from the dendrites to the axon terminal. And it's going to do this with something called an action potential. And so this right here, there's actually a cell membrane, and so it's going to be ions like sodium and potassium moving back and forth across the cell membrane there that's going to create that electrical impulse. So it's actually ions moving through those protein channels. All right, and this is going to require a ton of energy because it's going to move through active transport. All right, the next structure on here is going to be the myelin sheath. And so the myelin sheath are going to be these little, they're actually individual little cells that I'm coloring blue here. And they're little cells that wrap around the axon and they insulate it. And when they insulate the axon, it makes the nerve potential move faster. So your myelinated nerves are going to be able to send signals faster than unmyelinated nerves. And we refer to this as the myelin sheath. And so the myelin sheath are little cells that are wrapped around the axon. These are lipid cells, which are fat cells. And they speed up signal transmission. Now, sometimes after someone has a nerve injury, their nerves become demyelinated and then their signals move slower. So things are going to move faster where there's myelin. These cells are also called Schwann cells. So if you guys remember Schwann from the cell theory, he found these cells and they were named after him. So these are called Schwann cells. Most tumors of the nervous system are actually Schwann cell tumors. They're fatty tumors. It's the fat cells in the nervous system that grow out of control. And most of those tumors are benign. So they are not malignant cancer. They typically don't spread. They just stay in one spot. All right, the last thing going on here is the axon terminals. So this is going to be the end of our neuron, structure number 6. These are the axon terminals. And the axon terminals is where the signal is going to leave this neuron and then potentially be transmitted to the next neuron. So this last thing here, this is an axon terminal. And the axon terminals release neurotransmitters to stimulate the next neuron. Okay. Now with these neurotransmitters, so these neurotransmitters